Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Hello, this is Ronald Kinsella, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for that, Ronald. Right, the call outs for this show are going to Kate O'Connor, Glasgow, Scotland, UK, Bruce Maguire, Los Angeles, California, and Curtis Sanders of Hutchinson, Kansas. Hope you're all going to be listening to this, which I'm sure is going to be another fantastic, interesting show, because we've got a fantastic guest, Dr. Irena Scott, who I'm going to introduce in just a second or so. She's got a brilliant book out called Sacred Corridors, excuse me. I'm sort of about I've only just started reading it, to be honest, but it's really fascinating, all about cover-ups and etc. But hopefully we'll get to Irena to tell us a lot more about it. So with no further ado, I'll introduce you to Irena Scott. Hello, Irena.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the show, and I hope you're well and everything.
Yes, I
am. As we go, I mean, I don't know how you would like to start the show. Perhaps you'd like to tell us how you got into the subject of UFOs and how your interest began.
My interest began when I was a very small child, and my sister and I had something flying around their room. It was pretty weird, and we never even heard of UFOs at that time. And it was many, many years before I found out it was probably something to do with UFOs. But I was in the closet for a very long time and came out as an investigator years later. And so then eventually I started talking about my own experiences too. But my own observations was why I got into it to start with. Right.
And what sort of age was that? You a child, you say?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because I had a very young experience too but I didn't realise it was UFOs either at the time. It was like watching a star move and stop and move, but I was just thinking at the time it was stars moving and stopping, but it was only later on that I realised that what the hell was that? You know. But yeah, it's interesting. So hopefully you'll tell us a bit about your book you've got out. It's fascinating, actually. It's the secrets behind the real Project Blue Book, right? Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, and memory metals, and all sorts of other cover-ups and things. Where would you like to start? Try to tell us a bit about it.
Well, I wanted to. The main idea behind the book was to show what actually went on in some of the legendary UFO studies conducted by the government. And my book is named Sacred Corridors because I worked in places of UFO interest, such as where portions of Project Blue Book took place. So I actually did walk in these sacred corridors where its researchers had been, and I talked to some directly. This is unusual because Blue Book took places in areas of high security, such as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Battelle, Memorial Institute, that are secured. But I've been in some of the buildings, talked to the people that worked in there, and worked in the same organizations. So I have documents and photos and things of what was actually taking place. And I also work for the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is pretty much in the news now.
Yeah, very much so. Did you ever meet Stanton Friedman? We lost him recently, didn't we? And it hit the UFO community quite hard.
Yeah, it certainly did, because he's been doing an excellent job of representing science. I guess what most people have contact with is his writings in the MUFON Journal, where he discusses UFOs in a very scientific way. And also he's all over the place, all over the world, giving speeches and talks and meeting people and everything else. So that's a great loss.
Yeah, certainly. It's probably one of the biggest losses of recent years anyway, isn't it?
Certainly.
So with Project Blue Book, I think a lot of it was actually for public consumption, wasn't it? To really cover up the real things that were going on. I think the real reports went elsewhere, didn't they, rather than Project Blue Book itself?
Yes, it kind of depended on who was the head of Project Blue Book. Some of them took a pretty scientific approach to it, but some of them were just real debunkers. It was set up for to collect information from the public. And, there were other components to it, and that's part of what my book was about. Battelle Memorial Institute did a study that was very secret at the time, where they analyzed the data that came from Project Blue Book, and nobody was ever known about it except for leakers. And I had a lot of documents and stuff from that in my book.
Right, because Dr. Hynek himself started off as a disbeliever, didn't he, and turned into a believer after all the reports he was seeing, and which I find quite a fascinating thing, to actually become a believer after being set up to sort of debunk everything.
Yes, I was very lucky, because I was able to get some of his personal handwritten letters in my book. And most of his communications have been like in journals and magazines and things, where it's edited and everything, and I just have his full real self contained in my book with his real letters. And he was a really nice, very interesting person, and I think the letters show more about him than the formal writings and everything that he's done. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the TV show that's on at the moment. Well, I think it's just finished here. The Project Blue Book. It's obviously a fictionalized account, but it's still very interesting and makes you realise about the things that were going on. I mean, what are your beliefs with the Roswell crash? Do you believe there was? Well, I myself personally, I do believe there was a crash and some sort of a cover up. And but what are your understandings on that?
Well, what I think, so far as actual something hard and concrete, is that I found in the Roswell Museum archives a tape of a radio announcer, Wilson, who was announcing on the radio in Roswell that that a airplane was carrying debris from the Roswell crash to Wright-Patterson. And what was really interesting about it was he quit right in the middle, and he said, well, I just called Wright-Patterson, and they said the airplane is on the way. So that's pretty good confirmation that something was sent from Roswell after that, whatever happened, to Wright-Patterson. I think that would be called hard data or smoking guns or something. Yeah,
certainly. I mean, do you believe that there were bodies recovered as well?
There's stories about that, and I don't know. There's informants saying that there were, and apparently where they went was Wright-Patterson. And what I investigated was there's a lot of stories by a number of people from informants and things about what happened to the bodies, the possible bodies after they got there. And one part of that is the famous Hangar 18, where it's connected in legend to Roswell. And I did some investigating and possibly found Hangar 18 and took pictures of it. And I've actually been on base in Wright-Patterson and taken a number of pictures of the places of interest that are mentioned in the legends.
Right, yeah. And what were your feelings about remember the famous alien autopsy film that materialised in the mid-90s? Did you believe it was a real film at the time? I mean, I did. I was taken in by it, I must admit.
I don't think I was. I don't think I paid too much attention to it. I just asked Philip Mantle whether.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, but I don't think I paid too much attention to it because it looked like something that anybody could actually do, and so I take the film and everything, just throw some stuff together and do it. So I didn't really worry about it.
I did have Spiros Milaris on the show actually, quite a few shows back. And he did actually pay a lot of attention to detail about getting things that were actually dead right, so that anyone asking questions or looking at it would think, oh yeah, well that is the right telephone or the right this and that. But it's a very interesting thing that there's still people out there that think it's real.
There's still controversy about it, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, there's still people out there that believe it's real, but there you go. But it's still interesting. So, from the Roswell thing, what about the reverse engineering? What's your thoughts on that, with all the reverse engineering? Do you believe about the Philip Corso story about, or do you believe he may have been led up the garden path even by people?
Well, the trouble with all that is that there isn't any form of proof. They say it's secured in the government, but you think there would be some document show up someplace or something that looked real. And so I just don't know. I don't even know if, as a joke, I put it in my book several times about the little green men and the proof at Wright-Patterson that UFOs exist. But, I just don't know. I mean, at Wright-Patterson, I've been in some of the top buildings, like the famous Blue Room. Have you heard of that?
The Blue Room? No, I haven't. I've heard of a Green Room normally.
It's the place. It's the place for Goldwater, the presidential candidate.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, I've actually been in the building that has been identified as the Blue Room, and in a number of other buildings. And I think there's a good possibility that there's crypts and vaults under Wright-Patterson, which people say, and people say there's debris and everything else to study. And so I hadn't been in all the buildings, but I've been in some of them and taken pictures of the outside of them and things like that. And there's evidence that I think of that there are crypts and vaults underneath it, but I've never been inside a crypt and vault, and so I don't know.
Yeah, of course. The book was very interesting, Philip Corso's, but and I was quite taken in by it. Well, not taken in by it, but I believed quite a lot of it. But I've been told since that maybe a lot of it's been exaggerated, or that he was taken on. But it's, I don't know, I still find such a lot of it believable, but, like you say, we don't know, do we? Unless you were at the front end. I mean, he did have quite an important job within the US government, so it's very hard to actually put a judgment on it.
Well, I just posted something on my Facebook page this morning. it was on the national TV here of channel ABC that Stephanopoulos actually asked President Trump about UFOs, and they had that on there. And usually when they do that, they ridicule it and laugh and show play that stupid UFO music and roll their eyes and everything. But this was done in all seriousness. He asked Trump about UFOs, and Trump didn't deny him. He said, well, there were reports from pilots. And he also said he'd been briefed on it. I mean, obviously, if he was under security, he wouldn't say much. But that's a lot more respectable than what's ever been done before, I think, when you ask the president on national TV.
No, certainly. I think they are. They do seem to be treating the subject very seriously of the last month or so, don't they? Well, no, maybe a little bit longer than a month. But, yeah, they do seem to be trying to, I don't know, are they trying to release it to the public gently so that people are getting into the idea that there might be alien life out there watching us and flying around in our skies and we can't do anything about it? You know, it seems to be, dribbling out. I do actually believe they've released a lot of reports, but there's so much that's been released all as a peak. Certainly in this country, they released a lot of UFO reports, and if you search through it, you can see some very interesting things. But it's kind of all buried within everything, you know. You've got tens of thousands of pages, and maybe one page might have something written, you know, which is very interesting. It's like I've said before, it's like trying to hide a tree in the woods sort of thing, and you've got to find it. I'm a firm believer in that anyway. I do think they've released a lot of it. But I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but...
Well, I was surprised. I mean, I think that's the first time that they always, whenever they talk about it or somebody has a sighting or something, they always ridicule it, laugh at them.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Different.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be the in thing, doesn't it, in the media, to just laugh at things. It's certainly on the news programs, if a UFO comes up, it's it's ha ha ha, it's all funny. But yeah. But, So, how do you see your role in ufology? Are you trying to pass on the word that there are UFOs out there, and or are you just more interested in your own research? I mean, do you see yourself as a message giver?
Well, I'm trying to get more scientists interested into doing UFO research, because they always say, well, scientists don't believe in UFOs and scientists say they don't exist. Yeah. Well, I have a perfectly good background in science. I mean, I have a PhD, was a professor. I'd also worked in the DIA in a scientific profession of identifying aircraft, but on satellite photography and things like that are relevant. And so my sister and I had some perfectly good UFO observations, which convinces me that something's going on. And so I'm working in a scientific society with a project set up to try to interest more scientists in doing research. And I've also published in the scientific literature and the peer-reviewed literature about UFOs. So it's possible to do that. And so I have an interest in trying to get more scientists activated into UFOs.
Yeah, certainly. And obviously, you've got a good beginning with, as we were talking about, Stanton Friedman, because he was a nuclear physicist, wasn't he? And I don't think he ever saw a UFO, but he actually did believe in them.
I don't know. I don't believe in them. What I think is that, I mean, I don't view them as religion, as something to believe in. I see the information as data to put in scientific studies.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you're not believing in something without seeing it. Yeah, I understand. How do you feel about the Condon report?
I think the data in it was good, but I think their conclusions were ridiculous, because they had perfectly good researchers that did perfectly good research, and it's in there. But then when they wrote the summary, they said there's nothing to it. Well, that a lot of the researchers disagreed with that, and Conan said something about you should discourage any interest in children of UFOs. Well, if there's no UFOs, why would you discourage their interest in them? And a lot of those, he said they were no threat to national security, and that apparently people interpret that as meaning there's no UFOs. Well, those are two different things, and if you don't know anything about UFOs, you don't know whether they're a threat to national security at all, and that's what the ATIP program was about, was to look for whether they were dangerous or try to find out about them.
Exactly, yeah. And how do you feel about the Majestic 12 documents? I mean, Stanton was very much involved with that, wasn't he? Do you believe they were real, or were there some dummies thrown in there to confuse issues? And
I thought they were. There was no proof whatsoever that anything about that was real, and you'd think you might get some little grip on something that shows they're real. I worked for a government, and I saw lots of classified documents, but I just didn't view them as real. And I also had interviewed somebody that was close to that. His name was Robert Collins, and he worked with Richard Doty. Richard Doty is a famous disinformation person. And we interviewed Robert Collins, who was on, I think it was a 1987 TV show, UFOs Live or something, I forget the name of it, but it's where they first mentioned Area 51. And Collins and Doty were dressed up in profile as government informants and all that, which is where some of that began. And he told me that with the disinformation that the government gives out, there's also information. And so you have to be careful what you look at and sort it out. And that although some of it seems like really bad disinformation, some of it might be right.
Yeah. What about the SR-14? What's your feelings on that?
Feelings? It was done by Battelle Memorial Institute, and that's what I had a lot of documents from in my book. It's a very good study. The TV and the media show Dr. Hynek going around investigating UFOs and talking to people and things. It doesn't say what they did with the information. What they did was that Battelle wrote a very good questionnaire using professional psychologists and things, where they could get real discrete information on UFO sightings, like what color are they, how many did you see at once, how long did you watch them, and things like that. They put all that information into a computer and analyzed it, and then compared UFOs that are never identified with ones that are identified later, so that they had a control group. And their results were that there was less than one chance out of a billion that UFOs are prosaic objects. By the power of statistics, it said quite strongly that UFOs are real. But they buried that again in like summaries that said they didn't find anything and all that, like they did with the Condon, and just obscured it so that most people don't understand statistics, and so they wouldn't be able to interpret what the data was. But the actual data showed very strongly that there's something to UFOs.
What about the advanced metal alloys that were from the Roswell? Have you seen any evidence that some of those may have been real, or?
What I found was that when they did that study at Battelle, it was like classified and everything. And it was supposed to be done by statisticians and psychologists and people like that to design a questionnaire and then do the statistics. But the people that actually worked on it were metallurgists. And that immediately makes you wonder why they would have metallurgists when the study had nothing to do with the field of metallurgy. So people at Battelle had always wondered whether they sent some metal along too. And there had never been any proof or anything. Well, I had talked to this man that knew one of the scientists that was working at Battelle at the time, who was a metallurgist, and he told the man that he was working on a sample of metal that came from Roswell or New Mexico at that time around 1947. And he said that it was extraterrestrial, and he said there's a lot more that he can't tell, but it would have been highly classified then, but he had the security clearances to know about it. I mean, he was pretty high and had a lot of scientific expertise. And so I published that about 1994. And about when Witness to Roswell by Carey and Smith came out, they republished that information. And it was pretty interesting, and it was all over the internet for quite a few years that this might be memory metal, and there might be some form of at least informant information that maybe metal was analyzed from possibly the Roswell crash or something from out west there.
Yeah, I had Donald Smith on the show before last, I think it was, yeah. Along with and I had Kathleen Marden on the show before that. It was kind of a tribute to Stanton, but he mentioned a bit about that, yeah. It's all very fascinating, I must say. So, how do you think we're going towards disclosure now? I know we've mentioned a little bit of ordinary before, but I don't know if you feel we're actually heading towards the actual disclosure. Is one day the president going to sit down and tell us everything? I mean, I doubt it myself, but
I think interviewing the president and having him not say that UFOs are fake and answer in a serious way, such as happened just this morning, is progress on that. It's quite a bit of progress. And the disclosure, such as the ATIP program, and Harry Reid and Bigelow and Alf, I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah, no, there's some strange names out there.
You're welcome. And the rest, that's going a long ways toward making people take it seriously, and also all the jet pilots that actually came forward and talked about it, and the people on the Princeton and Nimitz carriers and jet pilots and everything else is pretty amazing. I think it has a lot of credibility, and people are taking things more seriously just from that.
Yeah, certainly. If anyone's just joined us out there, you're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. This is Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and I'm talking to Dr. Irena Scott. We're having an interesting show about her new book called Sacred Corridors, which I'll be putting on this. I've got a Paranormal Dimensions site on Facebook if anyone would like to visit, and I shall certainly be putting. What's that noise? Was that you? But anyway,
that was me.
I'll be putting pictures of the book in it, and that's all right, and showing where you can get it. But it's a fascinating book from what I can tell so far. I've only just I'm about a quarter into it at the moment. But and what's your feelings on alien abductions, Irena? Or have you got no opinions?
I don't know. I've talked to people that say they talk to aliens all the time and things like that. And the thing is, you can't exactly prove it.
No. Obviously, there's the famous one with Kathleen Marden's aunt. Obviously the famous abduction. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. What's your feelings on that?
This was the first American one that hit the news. They didn't remember an abduction until they were hypnotized. I've talked to Kathleen Marden helped me a whole lot on one of my books. I wrote one of my books is about my own experience with UFOs, and some of that happened in Massachusetts, not too far from the Hill event. And she helped me a whole lot writing up my book.
Oh.
And also, I've talked to Phyllis Budinger, who's a scientist, and she analyzed, Betty Hill kept the dress that she was wearing during her abduction. And Phyllis Budinger analyzed it with scientific instruments and said that where Betty reported she was touched by the aliens, that there were pink spots on her blue dress and that these had more protein. So there was some kind of evidence that something went on. Also, there were a number of elements of that were similar to an experience my sister and I had in Massachusetts that I had talked about quite a bit in my book and elsewhere. So I just don't know because you can't prove it. And a lot of people remember it under hypnosis, although some people say, oh, they remember it.
Mm.
But I'm kind of wondering sometimes whether they can affect your mind and make you think there's an abduction. I mean, it's not a mental thing where people go crazy. It's a mental thing where maybe the UFOs themselves can affect a person's mind some way too. So I don't know. I mean, I just don't know.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. There's also a lot of suggestion type of thing, isn't there? I had Adele Casellas Rocha on a couple of shows back as well. She gave a very interesting. I think her book's actually in the same printer company as yours.
Yeah, Flying Disc.
I don't know if you've met her, but she gives some really, really fascinating stories about abductions and so many different things that she's been involved in. But it'd be interesting. How do you feel about we hear about portals with UFOs sometimes and like dimensional incidents. How do you feel about that? Have you seen any sort of evidence of anything like that?
What I've questioned is that, as far as portals, they say that some areas are window areas or portal areas where there's more UFO activity than at other places. And maybe that's so, but at times I kind of wonder if maybe there's more publicity or more ability to report things in different areas. I mean, for example, in the United States, there's a lot more reports than in other countries, but we also have a lot more people, and we also have the internet and people to report to, which isn't true in a lot of places. So you don't know exactly what is about. But dimensionally, I think that's a possible good explanation that humans may be sort of primitive and not taking in all of our environment, and there may be a lot of other things like the quantum theory and dimensions and everything else that we're just don't understand in our environment that may have to do with UFOs.
Yeah, I've got a strong belief in that. I don't think all UFOs are extraterrestrial. I think some are actually interdimensional, and I think it can actually explain ghosts as well. I think sometimes we may be seeing a ghost which may be an alien, or we may be seeing an alien which may be a ghost, and I think a lot of that kind of blurs into one another. I mean, it's only my own theory and idea, but a few years ago I wouldn't have thought that, but I've seen so much over the last few years that I really do think there's a big connection with it.
Well, I think so too, because in either way, I mean, like if you see a round sphere that's floating through the air, what could be a ghost, it could be a UFO, it could be an orb. And it just depends on your culture on how you define it.
Mm.
So I think they could blend into each other, and a lot of times some of the studies by Kathleen Martin have said that people that have close encounters or abductions often have poltergeist experiences later. Well, maybe those are two components of the same thing.
Yeah, it kind of backs up what we're saying. We're getting some strange noises coming up here.
My computer will make noise. I apologize again.
How do you feel about the ancient alien theory? About the ancient, like the Sphinx and the pyramids and everything maybe have been built by aliens?
Well, actually, I have a lot of confidence that people are smart enough to do that. But I think the idea of UFOs as craft from other planets came in about 1947 with the idea that we might go into space and send rockets and all that up into space. But I think the basic format of things that are like UFO sightings have been going on for a very long time. And obviously lots of them were meteors and things like that, but some of them probably weren't. And even abductions and things, that might have been happening all through history, but it wasn't explained culturally the same way it is now. I mean, if you'd never heard of space flight or ET or anything, and you were way back thousands of years ago and didn't know what the stars were, you would interpret it as religion or something. Whereas now we'd say, oh, maybe this is a craft from space, but it might be the same sighting of the same thing, and just you might interpret it differently.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I find it strange that there's through different cultures throughout the world who didn't know each other existed, presumably, and they had kind of the same beliefs, but strangers from the skies, and they be holding the same types of implements in their hands and things like that. I find that very strange.
Yeah.
But, and also there's Atlantis. There's big connections there, isn't there, with the ancient astronaut theory? So it's quite a big connection with Atlantis. I don't know would you believe that there was such a place as Atlantis at all?
Well, it's a story that came. I think it was an oral story to start with, and then people wrote it down. So you don't know.
Yeah.
Origin and all that, but there well could have been. I mean, maybe a place that was pretty advanced, and people saw it, and it entered their mythology and got churned around, and then somebody wrote it down. So you just don't know. But I think there were probably places in the ancient world that were pretty advanced.
But you never came across anything substantial within your studies over the years?
No, I've just read about the ancient and seen it on TV, but so far as where I am in the United States, some evidence is that in a lot of Indian mounds here, they find meteorites, which suggested that the Indians had some idea of what meteorites were, that they're something falling from the sky. Also, lots of people see meteorites, and so people may tie that in with the idea of visits from extraterrestrials, or maybe extraterrestrials land and talk to people. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't want to, jump into anything where there's no evidence.
Oh, no, certainly not. No. But you can have your beliefs or thoughts on it. Obviously, that's all free, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I mean, how about implants and things? We hear these stories about people being abducted and having implants fitted. There's been some evidence that people will have these implants and they get removed by people like Dr. Lear and etc. How do you feel about that?
I think they ought to be real transparent and send the implants to a group of different scientists, be transparent about the science studying them, and collect all the data and publish it. And not do an internal review, but send it out to scientists, if you can find any that would do it, and get the results and see and compare what one scientist does compared to something else. And not even tell them that it's an implant. Just say, please analyze this.
Yeah, but you've not seen anything within your studies to back it up?
No, but I've not studied it either.
Oh, right, okay. Fair enough. What about, have you heard that we hear about different civilizations of different aliens, like reptilians and greys and etc. Have you ever seen any evidence of any of that in your studies as you've gone along?
Well, what I've seen evidence of is shapes shifting, that things can take different shapes and different appearances. For example, there was one observation by several people where they saw a UFO, and one person saw orbs, but another person looking at the same thing saw beings. And then there was examples of where a bunch of small orbs will go together and form something that looks like a humanoid, and that sort of thing. Where people looking at the same thing will see something different, or somebody will see a UFO and then back up a step and not see the UFO and go forward a step and see the UFO. There's a lot of that, which makes you think that it makes me think maybe that there's some laser activity involved or something like that, where you can change your laser to show a different image. So I don't know if you should take if somebody sees a reptilian, if you should take that totally seriously, because somebody may be giving you an image. So I just don't know.
Well, they're supposed to be on a different vibration plane, aren't they? And I think it's the reptilians that do the shape shifting, from what I gather anyway. I've never seen one. I haven't got the ability to see any, but I have heard of. I do know a few people that they have had the ability to see these reptilians, sort of using other people's bodies, and they seem to control them. I don't know whether, and these people seem believable as well. You've only got to accept what they say, But
yeah, I just don't know. I haven't. I guess I've talked to people, but I've never delved into it in a lot of detail.
No, I mean, I've heard that there's something between 15 to like 100 or so different species visiting this planet. You can take that with a pinch of salt, really. I suppose some people out there, but. I think there's there's certainly a few visiting this planet that we don't, that we may know about, or some don't know about. But and I do believe. Do you believe the governments do know about it?
Well, I worked for the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and back in 1968, my supervisor, we were in a section called Air Order Battle. And our, what we were supposed to do is identify all the aircraft over a particular area. This was with satellite photography. And my supervisors turned in a UFO report, which, we were inside the government. We weren't civilians on the outside. And we were supposed to be the top authorities for this area. It was on 2 missions. A mission is where the satellite goes around the Earth in 90 minutes. And it looked the same, pretty much the same on both things, except it moved a little. Well, my supervisors turned it in as a UFO. And they were just thoroughly debunked by the higher-ups, which made no sense at all, because the higher-ups said there was a flaw in the film. Well, it couldn't possibly be a flaw in the film because it was on 2 totally different pictures. And so I always wondered, from way back then, if the Defense Intelligence Agency was covering things up. And I imagine they have much better photography now, so that probably live video in a lot of detail where they can follow UFOs. And so I think they would probably have a lot of information. And the DIA is one of the main agencies that's under discussion now in regard to ATIP and everything.
Yeah. Did you, you've heard of Bud Hopkins, no doubt. I mean, did you ever have anything to do with him?
Yeah, my sister and I had several sightings together, and he interviewed both of us and my sister's family, and thought I was abducted, but anyway.
All right.
So, yeah, I've interviewed him on other things too. So he's a pretty good researcher. It's a shame he's dead.
Yeah, certainly. So do you not think you were abducted then?
Oh, I don't know. Because he tried hypnotizing me and I just didn't hypnotize at all. So it didn't work. We had a sighting where we might have had missing time. Maybe 2 sightings together. And, he asked for a timetable and things like that. And I made it, and it's possible, I think we may have had missing time, but neither of us remember an abduction. And I don't hypnotize at all.
Right.
And my sister thinks hypnosis is flim flam, and so we're not getting a place on that.
Yeah. I think I'll be the same, actually. I don't think I could be put under either. But I had on my third show, I had Peter Robbins on. I don't know if you've ever run into him in your travels. But he was a good friend of Bud Hopkins, and I don't know where I'm going with that. I was just sort of saying he was a good friend of Bud Hopkins, and he said he had so much respect for him. It's like you say, it's a shame we haven't got him around either as well.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I interviewed him once. He talked about in several of his books. He talked about breeding between humans and aliens, and so I have it on YouTube. I interviewed him, asking about how humans could breed with aliens, and I think he said, that they can affect the DNA some way.
Yeah, like hybrids. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. Now, we had a very famous case in 1980 with the Rendlesham UFO incident.
Uh-huh.
What's your understandings or beliefs in that?
Well, some of the people seem very sincere about what they saw. And so I just don't know. It's pretty confusing, but I guess it was near a military, United States military base. And, well, some of the people just seemed totally sincere and said, this is what I saw.
Yeah.
And I don't see a reason to doubt him.
Yeah. Well, actually, you might not know, but Colonel Holt is a good friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
He's actually stayed here in my house. And obviously he's coming. I'm actually doing a conference for him this year in September back at Woodbridge, because I live fairly near Rendlesham Woods, and obviously where he was based, yeah, and Bentwaters and everything. I wasn't here at the time. I used to live in Essex and London, but only 6 years ago I moved to this area, and strangely enough, as fate would have it, he's actually become a good friend of mine. So. Which is pretty weird. I mean, he lives in Virginia, so if you've ever bumped into him, he's well, he's a lovely man actually, and I believe just about everything he says. He's a bit confused about what happened back then, but I do believe his basic story is true. Obviously, I think he may, at the time, I've got a feeling he may well have been covering up for his men under him to protect them from the exposure to the media and everything. You know, it's But yeah, there's still a lot going on about that actually, because he's got his second book coming out this year, which he's writing with John Hanson. But
too.
But yeah, it's an interesting story. I just wonder what your feelings on it. You know, what you might have known about it. I'm actually trying to get Jim Penniston. I'm hoping to have Jim Penniston on the show sometime in the next, well, probably the next 6 weeks or so to get. He's very busy, but he has said that he would come on. So we'll see where we go from that, because he's got a book coming out shortly too, all about the Enigma code, the code that he got off of the UFO. So we'll see where that goes. But I just wonder what your thoughts were on it. That's all. It's quite a fascinating case. It doesn't seem to go away here, because it's like coming up to 40 years ago now, and it's still very much in the psyche of the ufology.
Well, it's one of the top ones, and a lot of witnesses and people coming forth and talking about it.
Yeah, there's been one particular case that's been very much debunked, because obviously Peter Robbins was involved in that. Unfortunately, the book left at Eastgate was removed from Cell because of proven lies that were in it. But that wasn't anything really to do with Peter. I think his side of it was all pretty well researched. You know, for the history of the actual event itself. I think it was his lies he was told by his co-writer, you know, and he actually did a very public disassociation with him. But that's still bubbling around. There's still things going on with that, but which we're waiting to see how that's going to develop. But
impressive.
It's all very fascinating and interesting stuff. So,
yeah,
is there some sort of a primary factor that keeps driving you in your research and investigations?
The primary factor is my own observations, which if you read somebody else's story, you say, no matter if they're the most honest person in the world, you never know for sure. But I mean, nobody has to believe me, but I believe myself. And my sister and I had observations together where we compared notes while it was going on and things like that. And so I think there's something to it. Plus, my sister and I almost got killed during a experience.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty nerve-wracking. It's something I'll always remember and have for motivation, because I worry it might happen again. So anyway, I'm pretty motivated to try to figure out what's going on, and I'm glad it's being more accepted now.
What happened? How did you get killed?
It's a real long story.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, we had this experience together up in Massachusetts where we saw this very close object, and while we were watching it, and I was trying to take a picture, a truck driver stopped. We were on a main freeway, and he acted real funny. He asked us what we were seeing when it was right in front of him, and turned in the opposite direction and said, "I don't see anything." Then afterwards, as we were driving away, we wanted to turn the car around, go back to where the UFO was. Well, he followed us. And he followed us right down on my bumper in a truck.
Wow.
With his bright light shining into my mirror. And I was blinded. And I switched lanes and slowed down and speeded up. And I couldn't get rid of him. And we'd already talked to him and thought he was crazy. But we were talking to him right when we were having a close encounter with a UFO. And the UFO was still in sight when he started chasing us.
Wow.
And so the way I got rid of them was to go on the left-hand lane and then swerve across the right-hand lane and get off on an intersection. And it was real dangerous because I didn't know whether he was going to kill us, chasing us. And the way I got away from him was if somebody came up on the right-hand lane faster, we'd have been probably killed or smashed. And so it was very dangerous. And so anyway, that happened right in the middle of a close encounter.
Wow. I mean, some people would write a conspiracy into that, wouldn't they? That they were trying to shut you up or get you, stop you from seeing what you were seeing.
Well, I didn't say anything for a long time because I was working for the DIA with one of the highest security clearances, and I didn't go around saying, I see UFOs. But I took real good notes on it, and eventually I reported it in detail in one of my books.
Yeah, that sounds a bit like that old film with, who was it? Dennis Weaver in it once, when there was a truck chasing him all the time, all the way through. I can't think what it was called now. But it sounds a bit like that. It must have been terrifying, I must say. Yeah.
It was. I'm supposed to give a talk about it at this year's MUFON Symposium meetings, too.
Do you get a lot of criticism with your? I mean, do you get people criticising or arguing with you in your symposiums or whatever?
Not a whole lot, because I try to be scientific and not say I believe in this or that or so and so. Try to say what the data is and try to say, if there's ways to interpret it and that sort of thing. But I do get harassed. Yeah. Especially by friends and relatives.
I think it comes with the territory, doesn't it? You're going to get someone who wants to be clever and wants to argue about what you're saying. But what do you like best about what you do? Is it passing the word on, or?
What I like best is real good research that is well done and shows results, and that's such as the study done by Battelle Memorial Institute. It had top scientists study it, and they came to a very valid conclusion that UFOs are pretty much real, and it was a scientific study. And I like good observations where somebody watches the UFO and reports in a lot of detail about what they've seen and what's going on.
Yeah. I think, like me, you probably find that you meet lots of nice people as well. I think there's quite a nice, you meet some horrible ones as well, I know. but generally you meet a lot of nice people and they become quite, I've made a lot of good friends through this whole subject, really.
Well, I have two really nice people that, I just value. Even some of them I've never met. I've just met them on the internet, but they're really nice people, and I'm just so glad I met them.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's like you. I mean, now I consider you a friend. You've been on my show now, and we've spoken and talked, and hopefully we'll do it again in the future. You never know. We may run into each other at some point, but certainly when this show goes out, I'll send you the links and everything for it, and it'll be a couple of weeks, I think, before it goes out. But I hope you've enjoyed having coming on, Irene, and thank you very much for taking time out of your life to come in and speak to me. And
well, thank you. I was very honored to be invited, and thank you very much for having me.
Oh no, it's been great. And as I say, once again, out there, if you're listening, Irena's book is called Sacred Corridors. It's on the what's the book? It's the Flying Disc Press, isn't it? It's Philip Mantle's book, printers. It's available on Amazon, and I will put it on the Paranormal Dimensions page anyway, and hopefully we'll speak to Irene again. And good luck in your future endeavours, Irena, and I hope you carry on enjoying life and take care of yourself and everything, and hope to get to see you again.
Well, I wish the same thing for you, and thank you very much. And I hope everything with you goes very well too.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, as I say, I will send you the link when the show goes out, and I'm sure everyone's going to be fascinated by a lot of what we've heard today. I hope so anyway. I'm pretty sure they will be. Anyway, I'll say goodbye now, Irena, and take care of yourself, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
You too, and thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone out there for listening. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yep.
You've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and this is the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Please tune in again next week.
Paranormal Dimensions is as bright and powerful as our celestial star, the sun. And although it's expending thousands of pounds of energy every minute of the day, have no fear. There's plenty left.
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.